Alrighty, so I'm here with my mom today. We are going to be discussing free will and questioning if we actually have it or not. Now, Mom, simple question. Do you think, in your honest opinion, that you have free will?
I don't think it's as simple as a question as you put it out to be. I think it's a very complex question. I think there are definitely things in my life that I can choose to do or not do, but there are probably more things that are out of my control and I don't have will over.
So you think you, partially have free will?
I do. I think that I have partial responsibility for what I choose to do or not do, but I don't have full control.
Where do you think the rest comes from?
A lot of our will, I think, is dependent upon what are normal society constraints, what are laws, and what are made in our environment from environmental factors such as weather, accidents, things like that we don't have control over. So it'll shift maybe decisions that we've made or decisions that we will be making in the future.
So kind of like, in a sense, vaguely, like the whole nature versus nurture argument, you're saying that more like, not like this isn't about like who we become, but about like the choices you make. You're saying like our environment has an impact.
Absolutely. I truly believe in the nature versus nurture. We're born with certain traits and certain risks, and things we choose in life make those risks come to be reality or suppress them. So I see that with choices I make in life, I will make certain choices based on what's going on in the world, and maybe I will be limited in some of my choices based on what's going on in the world. So definitely, I think there's a huge interplay between nature versus nurture.
Okay, yeah, I totally agree. All right, so I have this one example. So imagine you're at a cafeteria and you can choose between a peach and a chocolate cake. You think it would be healthier to choose the peach, but you decide to pick the cake. You think you have free will when choosing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of our free will has to do with our ability to make wise choices or not make wise choices, but that's still our free will. I could say, the chocolate cake's not as healthy, but I'm really in the mood for chocolate cake. I understand the consequences, and I'm willing to handle and deal with those consequences of, maybe a couple pounds or gain weight or increased risk of diabetes and so forth. But in that moment, I'm choosing, hopefully with a full understanding of the risks and accepting those risks if I choose that less healthy choice.
Okay, yeah, you pretty much got that spot on. Free will is the idea that up until the moment where you make a choice that you can decide to choose otherwise. So yeah, spot on. All right, now this second topic might shift your opinion. It's about determinism. So in that, do you think everything up until this moment right now has been determined by, say, our first choice or our choices in the past?
I do strongly believe that what's going right now in part is because of choices I made in the past. Absolutely. I wouldn't have my 3 kids if I didn't marry my husband at the time. I wouldn't be living in this house for the same reasons. And had I not gotten married when I did and had babies when I did, maybe I'd be doing something different professionally in my life. So I do believe that a large part of what I'm doing now was determined by choices I made. I could have decided not to go to college. Then my whole future would have been painted very differently than I'm living and experiencing it now. So, yeah. But then again, I'm still here. I haven't decided to move. I certainly could make that choice. So it doesn't set my path ongoing, but I'm here in part because of choices I've made in the past.
Okay, second question with what you said. Do you think that, so you kind of said that you don't think that your future is set in stone. So you don't think although this moment has been determined by your past choices, you still think there's a variance of different futures out there for you. You don't think everything is set in stone from the beginning.
No, I think that the choices I make today may impact choices I'm able to make in the future or where I am in the future, but I do believe that there are many different options I can choose today that will make my future very different based on what options I choose.
I totally agree. Yeah. I think determinism is really kind of an interesting topic, especially it's definitely a different situation if, say, you're religious, because in Christianity they talk about free will kind of a lot. I know you were Jehovah's Witness. Any talk about, say, anything being determined by the universe? I'm not sure what you guys like.
Yeah, so I mean, I was raised Jehovah's Witness, and I grew up in that environment. The only real determinism really with that religion, as far as I remember, was if I chose to follow God's path or Jehovah's path, and I chose that direction, then it would be determined whether I would be resurrected in the future at the at like the world's end. But nothing really about like future, more destiny, more would I be resurrected or not based on choices I made. Did I make the godly choices, the choices that Jehovah would view as good or bad? And if they were bad, then I would lose that hope of resurrection. And if they were good, then I would have that hope. So nothing in that religion, although Jehovah's Witness is very different from a lot of the more mainstay religions of our environment and our world, where I do hear friends and colleagues talk about some preordained and predestined path that they are just following along. I think for the most part, that wasn't what was sort of scripted to me as in my youth. But just make good choices, make choices that were moral and ethical, and then things will work out all right. So I guess if we say things would work out all right, then that is sort of a predestined future based on those choices, and maybe in that regards, but I think it's very abstract, and I nowhere did I feel in my life that I recall predestined to be a thing or somewhere in life. I always had some choice.
Okay. Wow, that was a lot to take in. Yeah, I feel like there's never ever going to be an answer to this, because there is so much like religious bias. I feel like there's so many different religions and people are brought up so differently like everywhere. So obviously we're not going to have an answer to if there's free will or not. But I would say, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, I think it's completely different than people who have brought up with a belief, like with a God that maybe has things destined for them, as opposed to someone who doesn't believe in that. Like, personally, I'm an atheist. When we talked about this in class, my professor asked, like, my thoughts, and I'm like, honestly, I don't really care, because whether or not, everything is determined or not, or if we have free will or not, it's out of my hands, right? So, like, if there is, say, a God who determines my actions, like, I can't do anything about it. If not, then the same. So, like, yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, I personally am not too attached to the whole idea. I agree with, like, in the beginning, I think it's situational, and there's, like, you're definitely, like, things are determined. Your choices do determine the future in some cases.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to believe that we're puppeted along the course of our life. Yeah. When we see people out there committing crimes of horrible nature, and to think that there's actually a puppeteer up there who's navigating their lives and making that their future, is something I just can't comprehend. I truly believe that it's a good blend. Maybe some ways heavier mixed in a certain direction than another, but what you're born with and what choices you make, the whole nature versus nurture. And in some ways, our paths, we have multiple different paths in which we can follow, and those paths will splinter off and branch out based on previous decisions. And, just the whole idea of being puppeted and then seeing crimes, I can't imagine any God would preordain any individual to murder.
Well, I mean, maybe Hades, the god of the underworld.
Okay. I mean, I guess if you're vowed to believe you're being ruled by a devil,
There's definitely some people out there who think that,
and they're usually schizophrenic or have some other psychological disorder.
But I feel like we've definitely gone off on a different tangent, but it's interesting. Like the whole topic of religion, and that definitely ties into free will for sure, but we'll discuss that another time. I have one last example. It's the voting booth example. I'm not sure if you heard of it, maybe not, but imagine that someone implanted a chip in your brain in order to control your vote in an election. If you go to the booth and you choose to vote Democratic, it will activate and change your vote to Republican. So it'll activate and you'll make you vote Republican. All right. But if you go to the booth and vote Republican, the device is not activated. Your choice was free, but you could have chosen otherwise. Would you consider that free will? Kind of ties into the first example.
No.
No?
I think right up until you make the choice, yes, it's free will.
Yeah.
Right up until you make that choice. You make that choice and you vote Republican and your chip's telling you to vote Republican. You made your free will. But you don't truly have free will, because if your free will chose you to pick the opposite, you'd be manipulated or forced into going back to the other. So I think right up until you make that choice, but your free will only is maintained free if you make the right choice. So to me, that's not free.
I agree. We did, just real quick, we did this other, she talked about this movie where everyone can only tell the truth. No one can lie. The government I don't know, program their brains or something like that. Except there's just one person who can lie. But all the people who are telling the truth, they don't know that's their only option. So they think they have free will. So I feel it's kind of like that. I feel I don't know. It's an interesting.
It's kind of like if you're given. It's kind of like if you're asked to make a choice and you don't know all the options available, you're making a choice on very limited information. If you don't know you can lie, you're not missing it because you don't know it exists.
I wouldn't consider that free will. I mean, it's definitely not if say if people are controlling you, then but I'm sure even if you think you have free will, we could be living in a world like that one where we think we can make choices, but in reality we can't.
It's kind of like the movie The Matrix, right?
I only saw half of it, so I would not know.
Yeah, no. Where
I would. Yeah. Okay.
You think you're making your choices, but then you can go back in time and erase what happened until you make the right choice.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting concept, but it's a lot like informed consent in medicine. I mean, you can consent to a procedure, but if you don't know all the risks involved, have you truly made informed consent? Mm-hmm. You can say, okay, you're going in for an appendectomy, but they don't tell you might bleed out, you might have an infection, you might die.
Stroke, yeah.
They can, but you say, okay, I want the surgery because they painted a prettier picture of the surgery than it was, and then there's a complication.
And
Did you really make a free choice in making a decision to have that surgery if you didn't have
all the information? Yeah.
Exactly. So the scenario you painted was very much like not having all the facts and sort of being steered down a cattle chute in a direction because you were limited in your options.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely, you need all the facts or you can't make an honest choice. I'm going to end this by just reiterating, just asking, has your thoughts changed at all? Still stand by what you said?
I mean, I do. I think it gives me a wider perspective of what I believe. I think it reinforces my original thoughts and how I feel. But it's always interesting to sort of investigate and test if your thoughts might improve if you have these conversations. So not really thinking about whether I have free will or not free will, but then kind of feeling like I have what I talked about, nature versus nurture, and then investigating the different options out there and kind of talking about them either will make me I would expect it's going to either shift my thoughts or reinforce my thoughts. And I think in this situation, it's reinforced how I believe and feel. It hasn't changed them.
Yeah, I agree. definitely interesting conversation, though. Thank you for joining me today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having this conversation, and it was very eye-opening.
Yeah.